Good morning, everyone. My name is Margie Russell, and I'm the Executive Director of NYARM. Welcome to our Elevator Contracts Seminar. This morning, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the management company view and how you prepare on the big scheme of things. And then we're going to go right into the elevator contracts. We do have 2 contracts, and if I could ask you to peruse it throughout the presentations to see if there are specific parts that you tend to have questions on. And then we're going to get into the elevator testing and how that has changed the whole scene and how it has changed the contract relationship among the parties. Our first speaker is Andrew Hirsch, who is the Director of Operations and General Counsel for Lawrence Properties. And if I could ask each of the speakers to just give us a minute on their background. After Mr. Hirsch, we have Richard Matthews from Fujitec Elevator, and then Greg DiNicola from Omega Industries.
I've been asked, I guess, today to speak about, from a management perspective, elevator repair and maintenance contracts, projects. As managers, we're obviously in the service business, and it's important to make sure a building runs smoothly. Obviously, an elevator is a lifeline for many tenants in a building, and it's I guess a source of emotion anytime the elevator is disrupted. So elevator outages for tenants can obviously be an emotional thing. How we go about minimizing the downtime, whether it's from the repair or maintenance, is basically the issue. And important to communicate to the tenants. It's going to ease their bad feelings about it. Truth is, as a manager, have some basic knowledge of the work of elevators, but not the specific technical knowledge. The thing to do is hire experts, right? So hire a good, reliable elevator company, and important, a third-party independent consultant. I think we're probably going to hear from both of them. I would go as far as the third-party consultant will write specs for an elevator mod, rely heavily on them, and write specs for the maintenance contracts. They're the best people, I guess, to oversee what's going on and to guide you as to what an elevator company should be doing or shouldn't be doing. So the key is, from a management perspective, is to plan. The more you plan, the easier it's going to go, and the less surprises you're going to have along the way. Planning, you want to plan the timing of the modification. If you're taking the elevator out of service, is there a better time to do it? Do tenants go away in the summer? Things like that. Just understand your tenants and their needs before you start the project. And the more you plan, the easier it's going to go. You want to obviously minimize the time that the elevator is taking. Things that long lead times, obviously the ordering machine or the cosmetics. A cab is typically a long lead time item, and something that if you're dealing with boards, something that can take a long time to further agree on. So basically, it's just it's relying on your experts, communicating with the tenants, and planning as much as you can the aspects of the job. It's going to be inconvenient to the tenants any way you look at it, and the more you can explain to them the need for the outage and the process, and communicate with them obviously along the way where you are. If there's any delay, if things are going smoothly, and planning staff issues. If you have elderly people in the building and you need to help them up with packages or whatever, that's basically it. So our job is just to coordinate between the board, the tenants, and the experts. Make sure everything's going smoothly.
I most of the apartments were still owned by the sponsor. And so when one elevator shut down, he was ready, willing, and able to spend overtime for everything to get fixed immediately, as opposed to, and that was, and I thought, well, let's let him come in the morning and let it be covered under the elevator contract, as opposed to approving the extra. And so, but if it was a co-op building, there would have been no question. That elevator would have stayed down, and we would just picked up with it in the morning to be covered under an elevator contract. So, can you think back to any situations that you've had that?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've got it.
If you could just.
Sorry, we've got a rental building that was down as a result of Hurricane Sandy. One elevator, and the elevator was down. And in the modification contract, we negotiated double shifts overtime to get it back up and running. So whether it's a co-op or sponsor condominium or rental building, it's an option. And you just need to weigh the financial aspects of, you know, the elevator being down longer or spending the extra money on double shifts.
So in negotiating any elevator contract, so like with Sandy, it was like almost a pre-plan. I mean, we knew you had to get this thing up and running. But we could be surprised when someone says, well, I have an open house on Sunday for, you know, a $5 million apartment. You know, we might, as managers, might want to say, oh, maybe want to give them the ability to spend the overtime to have the second elevator running, this kind of thing.
Right, well, you know, we'll talk about the elevator contracts, but in the elevator contracts, it gives you the ability to have repairs done, you know, overtime.
Well,
and you know, as a manager or co-op, you can pass it along to the tenants.
right. So, but I'm saying in managing property managers is for us to realize, you know, where we normally might have just let it go to the next morning or until Monday morning, and say, well, you know, we have one elevator down this weekend, that we might want to make that phone call, or I never made that phone call to the sponsor, and you know, he was very upset because he's always renting or selling apartments. So it's, you know, it may be Friday at 11 o'clock, and we may say, okay, we're just going to put up the signs. We do have to think through what's the dynamic of every building, because there might be someone, you know, so even though it's covered in the contract, you know, it's
a good thing to think about, that there is an option. Remember there's an option, and then just figure out how to pay for it, whether it's worth it.
that. All right, so let you.
Well,
Okay, so that gets us started on, right, the overall aspect.
All right, my name is Richard Matthews. I'm from Tech Elevator Company. I've been in the elevator business for about 21 years, all on the service side of the business. Worked for this elevator company, this is 12, and now I'm regional sales manager for Tech Elevator, handling New York and New Jersey. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the maintenance contract and answer any questions. One of the first things you want to do is make sure that you've got a full maintenance contract. There's a lot of different kinds of full maintenance contracts out there, but full maintenance contract basically covers all your parts. Mechanic comes there at regular time to do preventive maintenance, and what you want to do as a building manager and owner is just want to make sure that you have some kind of a check-in where the guys are coming in there every month doing their preventive maintenance. You also have in the motor room what's called a log book. In New York City, you have to do the Cat 1 and Cat 5 test. So you can go there and check that and make sure the guys are doing their check-offs every month and that the maintenance is being done. It wouldn't hurt to have a monthly meeting with your mechanic or your salesperson or account manager and just talk about what's happening in the building and the elevators. But full maintenance contract is the way to go. With that being said, preventive maintenance basically is to protect your investment. Make sure equipment's being properly maintained. Guys come in there, checking on the doors, riding the elevators, checking light bulbs, going into the motor room, looking at checking the ropes, the shiv, doing the normal cleaning and painting, checking the pit equipment, and talking to the building to see what's going on. Most importantly, you got to make sure the guys coming to your building every single month, that you have them check in your building and check out of your building. A lot of the complaints is that the mechanics have too many elevators on their route. Wouldn't hurt when you have your monthly meeting with your mechanics to sit down and find out how many units he has on his route. The units could be low in numbers, but depending on the kind of equipment, for instance, a guy may have like say 35 elevators. He's got old gearless cars, a lot of stops, requires a lot of work. So the most important thing is the hours on the route. Mechanic has 40 hours in a week. He's got like 4.3 weeks in a month, 172 hours of maintenance he's going to be able to do. But also keep in mind, the guy's got to answer callbacks, the guy's going on vacation. So I tell you, that monthly meeting with your mechanic, with your elevator company, find out what's going on, the mechanic, the supervisor, the account manager, really gives you a feel of what's going on, and also makes them more accountable. Obviously, with the elevator contract, if you've had a car, elevators for like 20 years, 20 years is kind of like the number people use to look at modernizing the equipment. So your third-party company or your consultant, they come by and do their evaluations. Talk about what are the things that we should be doing over the next couple of years. A 5-year capital plan is something that a lot of my sales reps do for their customers. Is put together a capital plan where they go in the building, they do a survey with a supervisor or a mechanic, and they put together a plan for the next couple of years to do upgrades. Because equipment does wear out over time, and we do that for the customers because they need to plan their budget for the next couple of years. Question was, there was a question about, I'm going to read the question and I'm going to try to answer the question. It says, it appears that the large elevator companies are short-staffed and only have time to address service calls. The neglect to properly address preventive maintenance only increases the amount of service calls. It will be wise for management companies to hire an elevator consultant that inspects the equipment and stays on top of the elevator companies and make sure that they're holding up their end of the contract. When I came into the industry in 1984, there were no consultants in the industry. I stayed for 13 years, came back after a few years, and every commercial building in New York City has a consultant. Most of the residential buildings in the city, they have a consultant. That probably came from the elevator companies. As time went on, there were really more and more profit concerns instead of just quality concerns. So guys did get overloaded over a period of time. They did cut back their resources because they looked at the bottom line a little more than normal. That was the way things went in the late 80s, early 90s. And consultants would become the watchdogs to make sure the elevator companies are kind of doing their jobs. So being an elevator contractor, I think the way things are going right now, that's really the way to go. And we look at it at Tech Elevator Company as the consultants as one of our partners. I talk about the 3 C's, the consultant, the company, and the customer. We all have to work together for the building, whether it's residential, commercial, to make sure that that investment is being properly taken care of. And so if there's maintenance that has to be done, we're here to support that. But the elevator consultant has become very necessary, and I would definitely recommend that for any building manager or owner to invest into a consultant. The next question was, no,
If you could repeat the question.
The question was, is it required, although you have to have an elevator consultant? No, it's required in New York City, you have to have a maintenance contract.
The category 1, category 5 tests that are now required,
yeah.
the mandated consultant.
Andrew, if you want to just use the microphone to answer. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the mandated test that came in 2009 was that you have to have a third-party company witness us doing the category 1 and category 5. So you have to hire that third-party company. They work with the elevator company to do the actual testing, whether it's Cat 1 or Cat 5. And the third-party company is the one that files it with the Department of Buildings initially after the tests are done.
So the question is, every building has to hire.
Oh, yeah, Andrew, just a little closer to the
Every
mic.
building has to hire a third-party witness to witness the tests.
Yes.
How often do you see those buildings hiring a consultant aside from the Cat 1 and Cat 5?
Now what's happening is now the third-party companies are also being consultants because now that's another piece of the business. So if I'm your third-party company, also now want to be your consultant. Initially, a lot of these third-party companies that came out and do the witnessing were just kind of doing just testing. but because of the demand and a lot of the competition, the price of testing went down. So now, as the customer, I want to be able to get another source of revenue. So now I want to be your consultant, and I want to be your third-party company. So now I have you for that part of this as well. So that's happening more and more. Is it a conflict? Well, the third, it's a little bit of a conflict, but it's really not. It's not. It's not because it's two separate things.
Okay, Greg can,
Well,
yeah,
let
Greg.
me answer that. It's really not a conflict because the third-party witness and consultant are both working for you.
Greg, closer into the mic, I'm sorry.
So if you as the owner, you would hire the third party and who can be, so basically the third party is the person who would be working for you. So they're your consultant or they can be your third party. You can use them both the same. If you were in the old days of testing, when the elevator companies were performing their own tests, that's when there was a whole thing that the city didn't like, and that's why they changed to third-party testing. Because now you have the elevator company that was testing their own units. But there was no watchdog eyes relying on that respect. So that's why the whole third-party thing happened.
And your third party doesn't have to be your consultant. A lot of buildings have one company doing their third party work, another building doing their consulting work. So you have somebody watching over what they're doing. So you can switch up. The third question was, as far as erroneous charges are concerned, the elevator companies always charge to rehang doors when they are off the track. The logic behind the charge is that the problem was caused by someone in the building either hitting, leaning, or kicking the door. It turns out that this is not always the case. More times than not, it's caused by a malfunction of the door operators rather than vandalism. Having cameras in your elevators can help with this. Well, it kind of answers the question. But a lot of doors don't come off the track if they're getting regular maintenance. They don't come off the track. As far as erroneous charges, we talked about full maintenance contracts. Full maintenance contracts can cover overtime callbacks or not. They can cover testing or not. There's a lot of things that you can put into a full maintenance contract that are not in other contracts. All of our contracts now have the Cat 1 and the Cat 5 included in the contract. We try to push for the customers to take overtime callbacks into their contract so they don't get hit with extra charges. It's hard to budget when you get a bill every month for, say, $2,000 a month, and every month you keep getting these extra charges for different things here and here. Doors being knocked off the track, damage, and water, and fire, you can't control that. But a lot of the nuisance is supposed to come at night. Guys come in here, answer call back at night, and you get hit with a $20 charge for premium time or for straight time, whatever it is. We try to sell foolproof contracts as much as we can. A lot of customers don't want to go for the overtime as part of the contract because they don't have a lot of calls. Doesn't make sense to have it in the contract. But wherever possible, we try to put all that stuff into the contract. This particular contract that's here has the overtime built into it. I think it's I have an addendum at the end where we added overtime to the contract. Yes, at the end, we put that into the contract.
So I understand that doors are pretty much the biggest issue when it comes to elevator shutdowns.
Open and close all the time, right?
Andrew, you just have to come straight in. Sorry.
Sorry,
I know.
So I guess my question is, what maintenance is included in a full-service contract as to the doors? Is it cleaning, contacts, is it the rails? Is there
Door
anything
locks,
up-
you gotta constantly, monitor your door locks, clean the tracks, the hangers, make sure the doors are opening, closing at the right speeds, and not opening too fast, closing too hard, where people wanna walk in and they wanna stop the elevator doors. I mean, there's just things that, you have to educate your tenants on how best to use those particular elevators.
But other adjustments done monthly by your company?
Well, the doors should be checked every month. If you're looking at, say, for instance, a residential building, the guy should be there every month checking the doors, should ride the elevators. Commercial building, the guy might be there every week. Freight cars, you can't always get to the freight car because someone's always using the freight car. So it's really on a building-by-building basis. But in a residential building, the guy should be there every month checking the doors. The guy should ride the elevator. In a high-rise, Class A, Class B building, typically the guy should be there at least twice a month. He should ride the elevators, and you as the tenant or the riding public should have someone that you can talk to, communicate something wrong with the elevators, make a note of it so the guy comes into the building. So you can't stop at every floor.
Is that maintenance written into the contract?
Some of the new contracts have performance guarantees where you gotta spend X number of hours on the elevator by month. And then the elevator companies have to provide the documentation as to how often the guy's been to the building. Within that documentation, it'll say, okay, I went through the door locks, went through the motor room. There should be specifics in that report that you get every month as to what's being done. Besides what's happening, the check chart, the motor room. But that's really just, a guy could go into the motor room and just, no doubt, you could be a pair of eyes for the mechanic, you know, so when the guy comes to the building, he should talk to the super, talk to the chief engineer, talk to the guy at the front desk and say, hey, what's going on, anything that I should know about. I tell you,
Okay, if you could, Andrew, if you could ask,
I was gonna say, you know, is it a good idea to have, you know, for you to train a super on how to clean sills and is there a specific maintenance a super can do on a door to keep it more consistent?
I mean, there's a little liability if we're gonna go tell the building super to start pinning the saddles, you know, the sills. I'm sure the guy can go there on his own, but I don't think that you wanna have that come from the elevator company. And if that's something that he does as part of his regular maintenance in the building, that's fine, but I don't think the elevator companies want to be in the business of advising people how to take care of the elevator. Now, guys go inside the car, the cabs, the rails, the car doors, the guys wipe and clean that up, that's fine. That's 9 times out of 10 that's not covered by the contract. If you look at any contract, you look at exclusions, car enclosure, the ceiling, the handrails, the car panels, the car buttons, that stuff is not covered by the contract. That's something that an elevator company can maintain so that it doesn't break down. It's just going to wear and tear and then we're going to have to replace it over time.
Okay, I'd like to answer that question kind of in reverse. Are there any extra repairs that might have to be done because you say the building didn't clean the threshold? You see what I'm saying? So while you're not saying it in the contract that they have to, are there common extra charges that's because the staff was remiss on something?
Well, I mean, you get hospitals where you get excessive dust, dirt, debris coming down the hatch on a freight car, or hospitals where you get stuff coming down the shaft where you have to do an annual clean down on the equipment so when they go in the building, and that will be considered an extra. If there's excessive dust, dirt, debris coming down the hatch, then that's something that we would go to the customer and recommend we do a clean down, but it's going to affect the operation of the elevators. You got stuff falling on top of the cars, door tracks, the saddles, it's going to affect the operation, and we want to get the customer to pay for that. That will be an extra that I would definitely say is definitely fair to go to the customer and actually take care of that item. But you got to document all those things. It's just not go proposal from the customer. That's why I say I stress that you have those monthly meetings with your elevator companies and make them accountable to you and your building as to what's happening.
Another question about that. Every Cat 5 or Cat 1, usually the city comes out with a final that we need to change the watts, or the levels, or now the old cars have to have a home. All these changes get to time. Is there any way you can know before what is required, whether the floors are coming down by 60%?
Well,
Okay, it's a long question.
yeah, they're running out of things to charge you for. I'm trying to think, 2014, but 2004, 2015 was mainly escalators, nothing elevators that I can think of in 2014. Most of the stuff was 2012, 13, 10, but 2013 with elevators, unless you guys can think of anything that I missed with Cat 1, Cat 5 code upgrades, I don't think there's anything in 2013 for elevators.
Just the pistons.
Pistons?
And the hydros.
Single wall systems are not allowed.
Yes.
I have 2 questions, please. The first one is, when you're talking about a full service contract, can you give us, I mean, I'm looking at those blindly, can you give me any kind of idea in the percentage cost difference between what would have been a traditional contract and a full service contract? Can you give me any kind of guidelines?
Well, your full maintenance contract, basically, the language you want to look for is that we will repair and replace these major items, the ropes, the shifts, the machines, the motors, the brakes, repair or replace. You gotta watch the exclusions, you gotta watch the prorations.
What's the cost difference for something
The
like
cost,
this?
yeah, well, the cost difference, my old rule of thumb I still follow right now is that the limited service contracts are about 65% of a full maintenance contract. Back in my oldest days, Otis still has it, they still have what's called like it's called OS, Otis maintenance or OM, and full maintenance and limited service contract, where it doesn't cover repairs, doesn't cover repairs. That's the main thing. They don't repair, they don't replace the components of the elevator. That's the major difference in terms of the full maintenance contract, where they can still take a look at it and put oil on it, and observe it and monitor and check. You know, check and monitor is two different things. You know, not a lot of work in checking and monitoring, but it's repair and replace what you want to look for in the contract. And to look at your exclusions and see what's being excluded from the contract. And look at prorations. There's a lot of little things they do with proration. For instance, like you get a 5-year contract and the guy prorates for 10 years. So over 10 years, the ropes go in year 1 of a 5-year contract, but you're going to pay 90% of the bill, and they're going to pay 10% of the bill. So be careful with those long prorations. If we take a contract on for 5 years, we're going to prorate the ropes, then we'll do a 5-year proration. So if something goes wrong in the first year, you're 80%, we're 20%. Then again, you have your consultant that's probably going to be in the building too. Use them as a check and balance to make sure that there's agreement on that work.
And
Yes.
the second question I have, please, is, so we have our elevator inspected, and then we get bills for the repairs having to be done to the elevator because of things were found problems during the inspection. So how do we prevent that from happening? Do we have to just get a better contract, or?
That's the first thing I was saying. You got to make sure that you have a foolproof contract. I mean, there's a lot of contracts out there on old paper that don't cover repairs. I mean, like the old, I don't want to mention the elevator company, but they've been bought up by a bigger company now. A lot of their contracts are out there on old paper where everything that had to be replaced or repaired, you have to pay for it, especially in the residential market.
Okay,
Especially
also-
residential market.
Yeah, and also, what is your opinion for a company that did the was responsible for maintaining our elevators, but at the inspection time, then they said we needed all these additional repairs? Do you think that was just because of the contract, or do you think maybe the company was somewhat at fault?
I think you need to look at your contract and your elevator company. I mean, I tell my salespeople when we're here today, I said we look at all our contracts, make sure they understand what the contracts are, and push for the full maintenance contract. Even though the rate might be higher monthly, you don't get nickel and dime long term. And we have contract on old paper. Like every month, we get a list of customers that got to get their contracts price adjusted on the anniversary date of the contract. And so, let's say there's 40 accounts for that particular month. So we have to go through every different contract. Some contracts have fixed increases, some have no increases, and then some are on old paper. If they're on old paper, get that in front of the customer, sit down, talk to them, explain. A lot of elevator companies don't want to come to you and tell you that you're on old paper, but they're afraid you might cancel the contract. And so, that's a chance that we're taking. But I stress, it's on old paper, it's expired, be proactive, get in front of the customer and explain. A lot of times that old paper doesn't cover repairs. A lot of those old companies make a lot of money because they got a contract, but you got to pay for all the extras. And that's how a lot of them are built that way. I'm making money on the extras, and then obviously modernizing the equipment.
So a few
Yes, sir.
other things to consider when negotiating a contract, aside from costs, labor, parts, materials, time of service. You know, when is the mechanic going to come? Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sunday, is that included in the contract? A few other thoughts that you might want to consider in your contract is a cancellation clause. If you're not happy with the elevator company, there has to be a way.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, thanks, Mark. Good morning, good afternoon already. I would think there would have to be a way to cancel a contract, so you want to get out, make sure there's a cancellation clause. Another thing to think about is that the contract doesn't have an automatic renewal. Back in the day, that was very common. A lot of contracts don't have it today, but it might get snuck in, so just be careful with that. Just some advice.
Well, the rollover is there, but you could make it a fixed date. I mean, for instance, a 5-1 or a 5-5, it's there. It's not enforceable in New York State. Most people know that already. New Jersey, you can still roll over a contract. It's not enforceable. But with the cancellation clause, I mean, if you're going to sign a contract with an elevator company, I think you want to dance with them for at least 3 years. The guy's going to tell you that I'm going to repair your machine, your armature, your ropes, your shiv, your motor. You can't be on a 1-year contract. Because I tell you the truth, that doesn't work to your benefit either. Because if they're there for 1 year, they can nurse it along because there's no commitment. There's no skin in the game for them. But for 3 years, for 5 years, they're going to make that commitment to spend the money doing a non-billable repair work. That's work that's covered by the contract that you don't get charged for. But if you're on a 1-year deal, those guys they're not going to go there and change those ropes. They don't have to, unless you have your elevator consultant bring them down their neck, or if there's something they can get away with as far as a repair, they're going to just, duct tape it, keep it going until the contract's up. So really, I think it's to your benefit to really get a long-term deal and have something in there say, hey, if there's non-performance by the elevator company, and you could document non-performance, then you can get out of the contract. But to go into a short-term and compromise short-term for long-term, into that equipment, I don't think that makes sense. So I think you want to look at a 3-year, 5-year window with your elevator company, and then just hold their feet to the fire and make sure they're doing their jobs. And if they're not doing their jobs and you want to get rid of them, they get it.
Well, that's why I think the contract has to have a cancellation clause with cause.
Yes.
Give them a few years, if it's not working out, you have a reason to get rid of them.
Definitely, with cause. They shouldn't fight you on that.
The other thing is when you negotiate contracts, especially, it usually comes around the time when you're doing a modernization, where you start interviewing a lot of companies. Some companies have proprietary systems, some don't. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, advantages, disadvantages?
Well, the way it's going right now is that 9 times out of 10, any bid that comes out for modernization, they're saying non-proprietary equipment. And we do, on our modernizations, we always bid according to the spec, which is not proprietary. We always give our price for our equipment typically at a discounted number. So if they're looking to save a little bit of money and live with us for the next, say, 10, 15, 20 years, we'll give them our number. But 9 times out of 10, it's not proprietary equipment. No one wants to be stuck with, they want to have the options. They want to have the options of being able to send their equipment out to bid and get the best price for a full maintenance contract. So it's becoming harder and harder on modernization to get your equipment in on the bid. I mean, as for Otis, Tissin, Fujitech, it's all the same. I mean, from a customer's point of view, I think that's what you want. You want to go non-proprietary so you have more people bidding on the service contract.
We have another question over
Yeah,
here.
hi. For your company, a typical route in Manhattan, how many elevators or pieces of equipment would one tech be responsible for?
Okay. It's 2 things. It's hours and it's units. But the thing with us is our market, our mix of elevators, a lot of high rise. So we have a low number of units, 33, 35 cars on a route. There's a lot of Gil's equipment. I mean, I got a guy, I just left 425 Lex. He's got 425 Lex, 14 cars, 11 Gil's cars. He's got 135 57th Street. He's got 9 Gil's cars. So his numbers are low. But a guy in Jersey might have 60 cars and might have 45 hydros and 15 geared cars. So it's the mix of units. So Fujitech, our product mix, a lot of high rise, a lot of residential. So the unit number is low, but because of the equipment, the hours are coming in around the same, 170 hours a month per mechanic. But our mechanics by units is very low, probably 35, 40 cars a man. I just gave that sheet any day about an hour ago. But so we're like 35, 40 cars. So it's hard to measure that when I say that to you because some routes, without mentioning companies, they have 80 cars. We have 35, 40 cars.
Does that, when they have that many cars to be responsible for it, does it allow them to do sufficient preventive maintenance?
The supervisors know, the answer is probably no. What they try to do is get creative by throwing a helper into the route, throwing a troubleshooter into the route, and free the guy up so he doesn't have to spend time doing a lot of troubleshooting they'll spend time doing maintenance. I mean, I'm saying, but I came from some of those companies that do stuff like that. They have a lot of units on their route, and then they try to, massage it so the guy's not spending, you can't do service on 85 cars adequately and go in the building and spend time troubleshooting. So they give them some support. But the answer is, no, you can't do it. It's too much, especially in New York City. Because even when you don't have the high rise, you still have just walking around time. You just can't, walking in the building, checking in, checking out, getting to the motor room. It's a lot of downtime.
And I think everyone would recognize that the better the PM program that you have, the less calls and downtime that you're going to have.
Well, that's the whole approach. That's what you're paying your money for, is that the guy that can maximize the amount of time he's in your building doing preventive maintenance, not answering callbacks, not doing shutdowns. Now, repair work is a good thing. I mean, because every so often things got to be replaced, but non-building repair is what you want to see. You want to see stuff that's happening on an emergency down, and we got to come here and change roofs because we haven't checked them in 6 months or a year. So it's twofold. Yeah, you want to maximize the maintenance to the guys in your building, and you want to know how many units are on his route, and you want to know not just the units, but the mix of the units, because the mix is really important. You have high-rise, low-rise cars, geared, gearless, hydros. So the mix is important. So when I give you that, that's why I gave you that low number. That guy's got a lot of high-rise stuff, so it takes a lot of time. That's like having, say, 60 cars in another route. So that's what kind of maximizes the amount of time the guy's in the building, doing maintenance, so you increase the uptime and minimize your downtime on your elevator.
And that then brings us really to the modernization, because the good preventative maintenance is hopefully going to limit the number of times over how many decades you have to replace or modernize our elevators. So can you just, I know there's no average modernization, but a complete redo of, say, a 10-story building, an elevator, would cost how much? And what I'm getting at is it's not how much it costs, it's if you have to spend that every 15 years, every 20 years, that by preventative maintenance, obviously, you're increasing the useful life of any building system by using 20%. It's an easy remark, but certainly 15%.
Well, a lot of the mod stuff that's coming out now is equipment that's 20 years old, 25 years old. And the big push is to reduce energy costs. So that's before you went from relay logic to microprocessor solid state equipment, okay? So now you got your solid state equipment out there. You still have a lot of relay stuff out there too. But what you're trying to do is people want to go green, they want to, go LED on the whole lights, and want to go AC gearless. So right now, a lot of the modernization packages are all about, making them faster and better traffic handling and stuff like that. But it's also green is the big thing that people are really interested in going green. So again, we talk about doing the 5-year capital plan, stuff like that, is we're going to the customers and we're making those kind of recommendations that they can put this stuff into their budget in the next 3 to 5 years. The answer to the question, it's a 20 to 25 years. It's what they look at as a window to modernize. I remember like the old Otis 401s that went in 1986. That's now 25 years now. Those cars now being modernized now. I see a lot of them being modernized. So the time is 20, 25 years is kind of like the benchmark that people look for to start to modernize their equipment. The consultants all know when it was all installed. They know what it is, and that's when they're putting it out there. Right?
Thank you. And then when we finish with all the speakers, we'll come back with any questions. Thank you very much. That was excellent. Okay, Greg, and if you could just tell us a little bit about your background and.
Sure. Yeah, I broke the mic though.
Okay.
May have to hold it.
Oh, well, here.
I got this, it's fine. Good like this. I'm Fred DeCola, Omega Industries is my company. We're an elevator consulting, testing, and expediting company. We do a lot of violation clearing also. So what I'm going to talk about here is the elevator contracts a little bit, but the violations and how we try to prevent the violations. I have a presentation prepared. I'm going to go through it at any time. Please stop me, ask me questions as is current. I'm really here for you. I'm here to educate you on this, because I get calls all day about these issues of, hey, my Cat 1 had this problem. I got this PBT from the DOB. Okay. How do I get rid of this violation? How do I prevent this stuff from happening in the future? So those are some of the things that I'm going to hit upon. What I like to always start out with, though, is numbers. I'm a numbers guy. I like to give the numbers out. Right now, there's 62,000 elevator devices throughout the 5 boroughs. 62,000. There's 90,000 inspections performed annually on those 62,000 elevators. There's 36,000 violations written out annually. Okay. An elevator takes 500 trips a day. If you go through the whole U.S. market, 12% of the elevators are in New York City. Okay, so if you look at that concentration, 12% of them are here. I always like to say that elevators are the safest form of travel. And usually people laugh at me and say, what do you mean safest form of travel? Well, if you think about it, yeah, you aren't booking a ticket to get on it, but you aren't going up and down. And if you think of those numbers that I just told you about, I mean, there's a lot of units with a lot of travel here in our markets. So. Right now with your maintenance, every elevator has to have a maintenance contract on it. Okay, so that's one of the Cat 1 questions someone was asking before. So if you have a little small dumbwaiter, you should have a contract on a dumbwaiter. Okay, even if you have
Well, so must, is it New York State or New York City law?
New York City, New York City.
A must, not should,
Must.
right?
Yes, so the big issue I see is a lot of building managers have a building and they know their core 5 elevators, but there's always this ugly one over there that no one wants to look at or talk about. Right? That's the one though that's going to cost you a lot of money. So now I want everyone to be proactive and get on board with those ugly ones, because the ugly ones, they're not going away, and they're going to cost you a fortune. I see it every day. A lot of my customers, we advise them, if you're not using it, just take it out of service. Take it out of service and stop the bleeding right then and there. The other problem that I have with a lot of my customers who have big buildings is they'll manage a building and there'll be 20 elevators inside the building, and then they'll have 5 stores. And one of the the stores are leased to these large companies that are across the country. Usually those stores don't do what they're supposed to do, because there's some national accounts guy in Chicago who's not in New York, and he really doesn't know that the elevator has to be tested, or doesn't know when the elevator violation comes in and has to be taken care of, or doesn't even know the violation exists, because when the city came in and gave the violation, they handed it to someone who just either threw it out or didn't get it to the right person. So even though those stores are leased, and they're not your responsibility as of right now, once they move out, they turn into a nightmare for you. And I can tell you I deal with this every day. And how it turned out to a nightmare is now they moved out, and yes, you're going to win a lawsuit against them. You're going to get your money back, I guarantee it. It's going to be maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, but the problem you're going to have is when you go to rent that space, your new tenant can't move in. Okay, so why can't your new tenant can't move in? They can't get a CFO. Okay, so even though you have this big fancy store in your building, you should still educate yourself with them and make sure that they're doing the right thing with their elevator. Okay, I mean, I have some customers now who, in their contracts with these people, they let the owner of that store take care of the elevator for maintenance-wise, but they write in their contract right there that the elevator testing will be done by the building. So the building then knows that the elevators are being tested and that the violations are being taken care of by themselves. So just something if everyone has any store out there, very easy. You can do a quick check on the unit and make sure that they're doing everything which they're supposed to be doing. Do they have any questions on that? Because that's a big piece that, like I said, we find all the time, and now it's something that we're trying to rush around and help someone get things done.
So it sounds like, and in the security deposit for this lease, the initial lease, you always look at all the possible risks.
Yes.
And so I've never thought about that. Now, that little internal elevator that goes from level 2 to 3.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, everyone shops, even in stores, Fifth Avenue, right? You take the escalator down, take the elevator, right? But think about it, they're inside the big building. And at the end of the day, if they move out, that big building is the one who then has to own all the stuff. So just something to kind of think about, because I see it happens, it's a nightmare. So I'm gonna talk about Category 1, Category 5 testing right now. It's been a couple years with the Category 1, Category 5. It started in 2009 with the third-party witnesses. I feel personally that the elevators aren't getting safer. I feel because some of the stuff that we were writing up early on, you don't see that stuff, and each year it seems like the punches are getting less and less. That's a good thing. The building owners are doing what they're supposed to be doing, because they have to. When you do your Category 1, right, you have that whole calendar year to do the Category 1. So you can do it anytime during January and in the year. The Category 5 is a different story. The Category 5 is due the month that it's due. So if you have a Category 5, it's really a 60-month test. 60 months. It's not really the 5th year that it's due, like the Category 1. That's a big mistake a lot of people do. They say, okay, well, yeah, they call me, hey, Greg, yeah, my Cat 5s are due this year. Great. Yeah, but I don't want to do it until October. Okay, well, guess what? The Cat 5 is due in February. You know, so now that we're 2 months past that, you're already being fined. So what I like to do with a lot of my customers is turn the cycle around and make it a 58-month process. So instead of 60 months, I schedule it 2 months earlier. So if there's any issue with it, you can get that elevator fixed 2 months prior. So now we have 2 months to play with. Because if your test is due, let's use May, in the month of May, and we decide that we're going to do your test on May 30th, and it fails, right? Once you get that elevator fixed, it may take 3-4 weeks. Guess what? We're into June now, right? You're already paying the fine. So that's why I like to do it all my tests cycle-wise. I've been 2 months earlier. It's something that you should definitely think about. Some of my customers say, well, Greg, yeah, you're doing it 2 months earlier, and then if I do it the next time, it's 2 months earlier, and look, my timer at that, you're 30 years, so it's fine, you know, but I'd much rather have the 2 months grace. The issue with the Category 5s, a Category 1 can be submitted to DOB unsatisfactory. Okay, Category 5 cannot. So if your Category 5 elevator fails, the elevator shut down until it can pass. So that's always a big misconception. Oh, you know, people call me, hey, how did my Cat 5 test do? Like, well, if the elevator's not shut down, it went well. If it's shut down, we got a problem. So that's just something about the satisfactories and unsatisfactories. So now let's talk about the Cat 1s and the unsatisfactories. So if you have a Category 1 test that's unsatisfactory, right? Me as a third party, I have 45 days, calendar days, to send my report down to the DOB after it gets signed by 5 people. Okay, so 5 people have to sign that form. Okay, the building owner or rep, elevator company inspector, elevator company director, third party inspector, third party director. That's 5 people. Okay. That all has to be done in 45 calendar days. If it's not done within that 45 days, it goes back to a late filing. A late filing means that you have to pay your money back. Once that paperwork is filed, you then, as the owner, rep, manager, has 45 business days to correct the unsatisfactories. Okay, servant says, oh, that's great, I have 90 days. You really don't. This is where you really have to get involved with your elevator contractor and your third party. And what you have to find out is what day your paperwork was submitted to the city. If your paperwork was submitted 10 days after the test and you have an unsatisfactory, you don't have 90 days anymore. Okay, you have 45 calendar days after that 10th day. So this is the timeline of what you really have to get involved with your third party and find out what day they're submitting those unsatisfactories. Okay, a thing that we like to do in my office, if you have an unsatisfactory, I'll try and maximize your time as much as I possibly can. But that's something very, very important. If you have an unsatisfactory, you have to make sure that you know the date that your stuff was submitted. Because then once it was submitted, that's when your clock starts ticking. Any question on that? Go ahead.
Yeah. Is it possible, I guess, maybe that,
I'm sorry. Is it possible to get an extension on that 45 days on both sides? For example, I just recently did my category 1. I hired my third party. While he did the test, by the way, he did a performance evaluation as well. So on the side, I have a report from my elevator company to help them maintain the elevators properly. But separate from that, I got a violation on category 1 unsatisfactory condition for not having Z brackets on the elevator doors. 8-inch bracket goes on the bottom, which prevents the elevator door from passenger side from falling into the pit should somebody push against it. Now I'm being told that we need these Z brackets. Nobody knew they weren't there, they were missing. It was picked up in the report. The problem is I have 10 elevators, 50-story building, 500 doors. There's no way we're going to put 500 clips in within 45-day period. Can you get an extension?
The bad news is you can't get an extension. Cannot. You can circumvent your own extension by telling them not to file your paperwork, have the work done, and then hire everyone to do your test again before the end of the year. That's the only way how you can kind of, I guess, beat the system. So that's really the only way how you can extend that time. Is say, okay, you know what, guys, I paid you. Don't submit my paperwork. I'm gonna do my test again before the end of the year. But you're gonna have to pay everyone a second time to perform the test, to witness the test. So
I would think though,
I would think the concern is, exposure, liability. I mean, if you get 45 days to put the paperwork in as a third party, and you get 45 days to fix it, so now we're what, like 3 months out, 2.5 months out. You can't go past that.
Well, you can go past that. If you go past that, you're going to be late filing, and that's $150 per elevator per month. So that's the other thing you can do is do your late filing, as long as you know now you're $150 per elevator per month. Right? Or once they submit that forms, and you're going to not fix it within your 45 days, you're going to get then, the DOB is going to then issue fines on that also, $250 a month. So any way you cut it, it's going to cost you money. Some of the things that a lot of people are starting to do with us now is we're doing the evaluations or Cat 1 pre-test prior to the Cat 1s. So we're coming in now, January, February, March is when all my guys were doing, and we gave the punch list to you and the elevator company saying, hey, this is your Cat 1 failure that we see. This is also your maintenance evaluation, which is wrong. Then at that point, once your stuff is done, give us a call, we'll come in, we'll schedule the Cat 1, and now your Cat 1 should be good. Providing that nothing happens between those dates. Question in the back.
What's being done to change the system? Because obviously it's flawed.
I know from day one, I've been trying to fight the city on the 45 and 45. Because to me, it's not fair what they're doing to you guys with the 45 days, and with us with the 45 days also. And then the flip side of that is, what I always tell the DOB is, okay, you give me 45 days, great. I comply with you, I do everything in my 45 days. Can I get my test reports back in 45 days? I know I can't. I'm just getting tests now that we did in September. I'm getting them back now. So just to show you kind of the DOB pressures. But what you guys really have to do, I know some of the other real estate groups have formed like a mini subgroup to try and fight this with the city or have your voice heard with the city with this stuff. Because they're really coming after you guys as the building managers, owners, hard with these elevators and with the elevator fines. While we're talking about the fines, I'll give you, if you were to miss a Cat 1 for a calendar year, anybody know how much the fine is for Cat 1 miss?
$3,000?
$3,000 per elevator. Not per building, per elevator. So remember that little dumb waiter I was talking about over there that's hiding, that's real ugly? Well, guess what? You didn't test them since 2009, 10, 11, 12, right? And it's not just one fine each year. It keeps going up. If you were not to do your Category 5 test, right? $5,000. Okay, $5,000, fine. Non-negotiable per elevator. Okay, and what happens, I can tell you, the sneaky one that gets everyone on the Cat 5 is a device called a roped hydraulic elevator. So most people now are savvy enough with their traction elevators know that they need to have a 5-year test. But there's these things out there called the roped hydraulic elevator. The roped hydraulic elevator, you need to know whether they have one or not. If you have the roped hydraulic elevator and it has a safety device on it, that needs a Category 5 test. And there's really no way of knowing through the DOT. So if you were to look up, go on the New York City Biz System, look up your elevator, you can't tell if it's a roped hydraulic or not. You really have to talk to your elevator company or your maintenance company. But those are the ones that I see get missed all the time. And those are the ones where someone calls me, hey, I just realized I roped hydraulic, my 5-year test was due last year, what do I do? You gotta pay your fine. Do the test anyway, but you definitely pay the fine. Okay, so roped hydraulics are always missed. Any questions on the part of it? Okay. Going on with the violations, right? There's a couple different types of ECB violations. Everyone knows what those are. Those are the Environmental Control Board. Those are ones where you have to go to court. It's a court hearing. Okay. A lot of times, the building super will get that piece of paper and he won't bring it to the main office for a couple days, and then it gets lost, and then a couple weeks go by, and a month goes by, and guess what? You just missed your court hearing. So what do you do then? You're going to pay a big fine because you didn't go to court. So you have to stress to your building personnel, anytime in New York City, inspectors in your building, whatever paperwork they leave, they have to get it to you that day. That day. Because it happens all the time. The paperwork gets lost, and someone will call me and they're like, hey Greg, I just realized that we had a court date last week. What do you think we can do? I'm like, well, unless you got that time machine, you aren't doing much except for paying a big fine. So you can try and reopen.
Can you repeat the question, please?
They were asking if you can go to the city if you can reopen. You can reopen, but you also have to be aware of it. And then I've had customers where we fought to reopen these for them, and then they missed their court date again. So it's only you bring a horse to water, right? And you have to make them drink. But I mean, the main thing is to stress to your employees who are on the front line of the building to get whatever paperwork is left to you. The days of where people sit back and will figure it out when it happens and the fine is that, no, that's not. Now with this stuff, you have to be as proactive as you possibly can. You got to be on top of everything with these elevators because the numbers, it just multiplies. And the worst part is the C of Os. If you try and get refinancing, you can't. And if you're trying to close, I mean, I had it happen downtown. There were 6 small buildings. They knocked them down and put up one huge building. Right? Had a demo permit, great. There were 6 sidewalk elevators in one of these buildings that no one took a permit out for. They were trying to close on all these condominiums and they could not close because they couldn't make the C of O. We had to go down there, take permits out for all these units aren't there anymore, and go through the system. And I can tell you, the owner was telling me that he was gonna lose $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 per week that he could not close. So just something to get out there with the C of Os. The C of Os turn into a huge headache because it always has to happen now. So you can't do anything until your building's clean.
Right, and the C of O also translates into leasing space, because there are many companies who will not lease space unless you have the proper C of O for the building.
Yes. So the C of O turns into, usually when someone calls my office and they have a C of O problem, it's one of those, okay, everyone's got to drop everything, we've got to get working on this right now. Because, it always ends up that someone's trying to do something and it's a time-sensitive issue. And working with the city, as much time-sensitive as you want to be, they're not going to move that quick. Right? We used to be able, last year, to go to the DOB and tell them, hey, this customer's going for a C of O, we can pretty much like leapfrog up to the head start. What happened though is everyone was saying we're getting a C of O and everyone's trying to leapfrog. And so You know, I'm not saying that everybody wasn't getting a CFO, but that's what was going on, and now it's kind of, all right, you gotta go through the mud, and you got to stick in the mud and we're slowly moving. The other thing with the ECBs, to clear those violations, it's a bit of a process, right? It's letters from you, the owner, letters from the elevator company. It's either a bank check or cash, so it's not going to be a company check. So it gets real messy. Does anyone have any ECB questions over here now? Because everyone's clean, no one's got ECBs?
In regard, no, in regards to the elevator pit, who is responsible to clean out the pit? Is it the elevator service company or is it the superintendent? And where's the line?
Okay, I can tell you from being an elevator guy my whole career. I started fixing elevators and managing, and now I'm consulting. You do not want your building personnel in that pit. I don't care if it saves you $10,000 a year. I've seen many lawsuits happen because your personnel are trying to move the elevator to get to the pit, and they're not moving it the right way, and they get hurt, and there's problems. So, me personally, all of my contracts that I write, the building personnel does not go in that pit. Even if it has a door and it's a walk-in pit, doesn't matter. When I worked at Otis Elevator, we had a huge lawsuit in one of the big buildings here because they had a walk-in pit. And they had a walk-in pit, and the guy opened the door, right, and there was a switch on the door that's supposed to stop the elevator. Well, someone put a stick in that switch. So now the guy's there, and he's sweeping around. The traveling cables, which if you look on the diagram Dumbo gave us, traveling cables, grab the guy by his, he had a radio. Remember the old radios that everyone had? The radios on the back of his belt? Grabbed them, took them up 4 floors, and then dropped them. Okay, so you do not want your personnel in that elevator pit. You know, like I said, you can probably save yourself, some money over the year, but trust me, it's not worth it. And a lot of times also, I've had it where the building personnel that were in the pit, they shut the elevator down because they didn't know not to sweep around the switch or this or that. So it's better to keep your personnel outside, but the elevator people do their thing.
Okay, so there's probably not a building department or state or government law that says they can't from a mechanical standpoint, but it sure sounds like an OSHA issue to me.
Yeah,
So,
to me, it's liability. The liability of it is huge, it really is. And also let the elevator guys do what they do. That's something that, it's in their scope. All of my contracts, it's written that the elevator company cleans the pits.
okay, so maybe we could just have a quick comment. Fujitech, as far as the pits, do we make buildings aware, keep your staff out, or is it, a recommendation or an absolute in the contract? Because we can have contract laws say stay out.
Yeah, we just, we talk to our building managers and supers and let them know that the elevator stuff is ours, and building personnel to kind of just steer clear. Every once in a while, a guy wants to come into the motor room, even help paint, like we don't even know paint. Just let us do all the elevator stuff, and the building guys do all the building stuff.
Okay, but this is not in the contract. No one ever mentions this aspect in the contract.
Language, that particular language is not in the contract, but it's implied and communicated.
And it's usually never checked if something happens.
Right.
Well, okay, that's why we're talking about it, so, okay.
That's always a big problem. Yes, sir.
How do you evaluate a third-party firm to do the
As far as if you're going to select one, how do you know who you? I mean, the best thing is to talk to your friends who manage other buildings and say, hey, I'm looking for a new consultant / third party. Who have you had success with? Because you talk to some people have had a lot of problems. Some people have had wonderful experiences. So I would really talk around. The word of mouth thing to me is always our best seller. The other thing what you can do, and you should do, is you should always check the DOB to make sure that your third party is licensed. Right? Even though it sounds silly that the third party is not licensed, there are a lot of people out there who are not licensed, and they're just selling the work and using someone else. So there's a couple of little things there that you have to really watch out for. I know at the end of the day, pricing is always an issue, right? The bottom line is the bottom line. I can tell you from customers that I lost for $10 per elevator, gladly came back to me the following year when they found out that the third party held their paperwork up, didn't file it on time. I've heard all the nightmare stories. So that's why I really want to be proactive with them and talk to them. Hey, my test was today, great. My 45th day should be this day. What day you bring the paperwork down? Follow up that week, email, phone call. Hey, I know my paperwork was supposed to go down. Did it go down? What's the date it went down? So now you know, especially on unsatisfactories, you know when your clock is ticking.
We have a question.
So I have a question. Who is responsible to file for those categories? The third party or the elevator?
You can, as of right now, in New York City, either of them can file it for you. Okay. Personally, with my company, I file everything myself because I like to control the paper. I control the paper because I'm working for you. So I work for you.
Okay, but Greg, the law
yes,
says.
But they do. But I'm the third party. That's the watchful eye for you.
The third party should be.
The third party should. A lot of third parties don't like to file the paperwork because it's a hassle. And my staff who's here can tell you it's a hassle that we have that paperwork, and then some of them I'm holding for customers to certain dates and this and that. It's definitely a hassle for us, but for me, I feel it's the right thing to do for you as a customer. Because if you have problems with the violations, I'm the one who can help you with
The
it.
law says the owner is responsible, and then the owner gets to choose who they're going to contractually make responsible.
Yeah, basically, if you look at the ELV3s, whoever goes to box 4, goes to whatever box 4, that's the person who's going to file it.
Okay, but they're just allowing others to file, but the
Yeah,
owner,
well,
meaning the property manager, is responsible to make sure it happens.
Oh,
The violation goes other, right, so the should can be whoever is contractually bound,
Yes, yep.
but it's the owner and then ultimately the
And I
property
can tell
manager.
you, the majority of elevator companies that I deal with like that I do the paperwork. It's one less thing for them to worry about. They got enough going on. They got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of curveballs being thrown at them. They'd rather let me handle that for them.
Okay,
Question over here?
Yeah, hi, if someone drops their keys or their iPhone down the elevator, who should we get it? Can the super get it? Or do you hope because it's dangerous, or should we wait till an elevator person comes?
Okay, you should wait and call the elevator company and let them get it. They're gonna charge you for it, but I can tell you in the long run, it's gonna be much better that they get it because of the liability issue. You don't want people going into pits, I remember when I was fixing elevators 100 years ago, I walked into a building and there were two guys laying on the floor trying to figure out how to get themselves down in there to get their keys. I'm like, what are you guys doing? The doors are closing on the guy's shoulder. I'm like, what's going on here? Sure enough, the guy dropped his keys in the pit. I'm like, give me 5 minutes, I'll get everything for you. But you should contact the elevator company. Let them do it for you. Like I said, unfortunately, they're going to charge you for it. But those are things that, one of the things to piggyback on, we were saying earlier about the contracts. What I like to do in a lot of my contracts is when you sign your maintenance contract, I like the elevator company to give you kind of the menu of prices on the back page. So now you know if you want overtime on Saturday, how much it is right there. If you know the keys are in the pit, there's that price right there for you. It just makes things much easier. If your testing's not covered in your contract, which all my new contracts now, I put testing in there for you. But some people don't want it because they say, okay, I'm going to be paying a higher maintenance price than because they're putting the testing in there. I would rather them at least put the price there. So Cat 1 will cost X amount of dollars, Cat 5 costs X amount of dollars.
What I'd like, is there any other commentary from any other?
Got a question right over
Oh,
here.
was there a question?
I just have a question. If you're putting testing in your contracts, does that include corrections, if it's unsatisfactory or rejected?
Yeah, that's.
Okay, repeat the question.
Okay, the question was, if you do put testing in there, are your violations really covered in there also? Okay, if you have a full service elevator contract, so the full service contract that he was talking about earlier today, that means everything is covered from soup to nuts. The majority of the time, whatever your violations are, they're gonna be covered. Unless they come to building items. And everyone usually knows the building items are the door, the fire extinguisher, the phone line that everyone likes to shut off on us, right? So there's probably, 8 or 9 owner items there, which you can relate back. But if you have a good contract, your violations should be covered. But if you're doing your test every year, just like you're supposed to, if you have a consultant to come in and do the maintenance evaluation, not at the same time as the test, right? The maintenance evaluation should be done separately from the test. There's no way anyone should be doing a maintenance evaluation at the same time they're doing a Category 1 test. It's not fair to you as the owner, it's not fair to the elevator company, right? So that's something you have to stress also, is if when you're working with the elevator companies and you're gonna get them to do the maintenance evaluation for you and your testing, you wanna get dates from them. Doesn't be the exact date right now, but if you're signing a contract in January, okay, if people call Greg, okay, we're doing our MEs, when? I'm gonna do them for you in February. Great, I'm gonna give you a report, and then we're gonna schedule your test in June. They should not all happen at the same date. Right? Because you wanna take that maintenance evaluation, give it to your elevator company, and hey, here's your mess, clean it, and then we'll test it. Go ahead.
If you would like to pick the right company, third-party consultant, what kind of people should be a part of this? Should it be an engineer? Should it be a field man? Like, who is making decisions for modernization, let's say, for this pole?
If you're looking for, like I'm saying, if you're looking for a good third-party consulting company, you wanna kind of question them. You wanna interview them, right? And make sure that they're capable. Make sure they have their licenses. How many licensed people do they have working for them? The license that they have to have is a New York City agency. So you have to have a New York City agency. That's the first thing. The second thing then is they have to have New York City elevator inspectors that are underneath them. And it's very easy now. New York City made it very easy with their website. You can go there and there's the whole thing. It's called Check My Contractor. And you basically put the name in. You can put the individual's name in. You can put the company name in. No, this is on the DOB. Yeah, you go to your NYC, NYC.gov.
But who should be responsible for reviewing the scope of modernization?
On the modernization, your best bet is to get an outside of elevator consultant. If you go to your current elevator maintenance contractor, and I don't want to beat on the elevator guys, but a lot of times they're going to direct you where they want to direct you. And sometimes they're right. They can tell you, right before, very honest, what you're saying. Some of the companies, aren't like that, and they're going to want to steer you down their path. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But at least if you have someone who's working for you,
Should it be engineer or field man? Who should it be?
Well, what you really want to do is you want to get a mix of a company, of someone who has people that have prior field knowledge, and that they were prior field knowledge that they've done the installs, that they've been at the higher level of the supervisors and the, fixing the elevators. Those kind of people we want them, because those are the people that did the install in a previous life, and they know exactly what they're doing and how, and what's good about that is that they can run the schedule for you. And that's what I usually do, is I pretty much take the whole elevator portion away from you.
There is no so-called architect or engineer. It mostly field guys.
Well, yeah, because most of the time the architects and engineers were never elevator guys. The architects and engineers, architects, so a lot of times you want to get the elevator guy. Guys who had experience who did the job.
Okay, but the engineer who's going to sign off on this at the building department still has to be a PE, correct?
When you do your permit, so when we get to the permitting process, right, basically the elevator company gets all the drawings for you, and then there has to be an engineer who's going to stamp them. So basically the drawings come from, the elevator company makes the drawings, they send them to the consultant and the owner, and then the owner and the consultant approve them. Then they go for the permit process where at that point we're stamped by PE.
Okay, but before the drawings are made, the drawings are from specs. The specs are from a PE who is an elevator specialist.
Most of
you
the
got
time,
that?
no, most of the time the specs are from an elevator consultant.
A
So,
consultant,
it's from
okay.
us, yeah.
Okay, but
Someone has the PE, that's what.
he doesn't have to be, right. he
Most,
doesn't
I
have to
can
be-
tell you, most of the consulting companies don't have PEs. They don't, like, for me personally, for my business, I don't need a PE. Because to certify the stuff, I don't need to certify it right now. I just need to know that I took a look at your elevator and you need to change this, and this, you know, from a practical standpoint.
Oh, okay, so it's in the filing of the documents.
It's in the
That's
filing
when
of
it
the
has to be
documents where it
stamped
gets
with the
stamped,
PE.
yes.
Right,
yes.
so that PE is willing to take the responsibility
Yeah.
of someone else who drew up the specs.
Yep. Got a question over here, John?
I want to change elevator. I want to hire a third party consultant. What is the price range that I should be looking at for someone to do the evaluation? What comes along?
It can range anywhere. It basically depends
Question.
on, okay. The question was, I want to hire someone to do a maintenance spec for me to get rid of my existing elevator company. How much should I pay? And it's going to depend on the type of building you are, the size of your building, how many elevators you have, what kind of equipment you have. I mean, so basically, when I go and survey that job, I'm looking at how much work it's going to be for me. You know, how many hours? You know, it's going to be 10 hours. It's going to be 50 hours. You know, that's how most of us do it. So there's no real, you should pay X amount of dollars for it. Okay, any other questions? Okay. If anyone has questions for me afterwards, I'll be around. I have an expediter violation specialist with me, so if you have any specific questions, we can answer those for you. If you want a copy of this that I made, just give me a card, I'll email it to you. It has a lot of good stuff that I can cover with how to get rid of those PVPs, VCBs, and all that stuff.
Can I just ask quickly, since you mentioned expediter?
Yes.
Do you automatically engage in
A lot of the building owners who I deal with who have their own internal expediters usually don't get involved in the elevators. The elevator world is very messy when it comes to the elevator. When it comes to the DOB, the elevator division is usually a lot messier. Pretty much goes back to the whole pit thing. Let us do what we're really good at, and let the plumbing experts do what they're good at. Okay, any other questions? No? Martin? Thank you.